So what we wanted to talk about then today is how to optimize your society events in the member app in a little more detail than we were able to cover on the monthly member nation call that we had last week. So this will be a little bit more in depth and detail on exactly how you would go about doing that. Um, and then at the end, depending on what you guys want to do, we could certainly go into more detail about setting up lightning events, since that's really what we're moving toward. We're getting away from the simple and conference style events and moving strictly over to the lightning style. Or since most of you are probably fairly familiar with that already, we can just sort of bypass that part. So we'll kind of see what you feel like once we get to that part of the call. So what we will cover then, again, are what your events are going to look like in the member app, what your members are going to see, or what other members are going to see, since basically the individuals can see any other society's events that are there in the app by setting their filter preferences. And then we'll talk about how you can optimize your events so that they'll display kind of to their best advantage in that tool. We'll talk about how you can set up events either for doing some sort of kind of like testing, if you wanted to do almost like a beta test for your registration, and have just your board members, for example, test the registration first. Or if you want to have an event that you never want to necessarily push out to the member app, we'll talk about how you can set that soft launch status to allow that to take place. And then we'll talk a little bit about quality control that you might want to do going forward for your events. And then again, depending on what you guys want to do, we can do a review of kind of the differences between simple and conference, and then the lightning style if you'd like. So first of all, what are your members going to see? The member app is available basically to anybody who's a member. So once they have downloaded the app, and one thing to point out too is the app itself is currently live. So what's being added to that is just this events piece. Before now, there was essentially a kind of a library with various articles and things like that were available for members to review and read and store. But now going forward, this events piece will be added to the app as well. So members, once they have the app on their phone, then they can go in and they can set their various event filters. They can choose, for example, if they want to see just live online events, they can put that restriction in place. And then they can also determine which society's information they're going to see, which society's events they're going to see. It's going to default to display events for the society or societies to which that person belongs. Again, assuming that society is currently onboarded and setting up their events in Member Nation. Then they will also have the ability to select any additional societies that they would like to view events for. And again, it will show them those societies that are currently active within Member Nation, and will let them choose which societies they want to be able to view events for. And then once they've set those parameters, then they'll be able to see a list of upcoming events. And you can see here just kind of an example of what that list might look like. As they're kind of looking at each of those events in the member app, they have the ability to swipe on any of those events, and they can either get to the register link there, or they can add or remove those events from their own My Events list, kind of a filtered list that shows just those events that they're interested in. The register links that are here, either by swiping or on the actual event piece itself, that link takes them basically to the Member Nation registration page. They don't register through the phone or through the app itself. They're basically taken to the registration page that would be your normal page that you would have set up. And again, then they could obviously drill into individual events to see more details. And you can see an example here of what an event might look like. You can see that up at the top, it's kind of highlighting whether or not that event qualifies for CE credits. You can see an overview with more details about the event. And then the two sections that are kind of pulled out almost as kind of a call out box, or the speaker section, and also the venues or location section. So we're going to talk about each of those pieces in more detail and exactly how you would go about setting them up within Member Nation to make sure that it's displaying the information that you'd like there. So how do you go about actually optimizing your events so that they'll display the way you want in the member app? So again, the fields that you're going to see in the member app, we're just kind of going to kind of go through each of these and talk about them in a bit more detail. Obviously, the event display name is going to be the first thing that someone's going to see. So one thing that's important to note there is if you're used to having things like the date of the event, information about who the speakers are, things like that. You just want to make sure that you're not essentially duplicating information that's going to be somewhere else on the page. And this goes both for the app as well as just for the registration page. So for example, if you had the date incorporated into the title here, it would be repeated. So if that information is useful for you to have in the title for your own tracking purposes and just to make it easier for you to kind of organize your events, you can always keep that in the official title, but then change the display name for that event so that because the display name is what's going to pull onto the app. So you could always have more of an outward facing display name and then have a more detailed full name for the event to make it easier for you to kind of organize and keep track of your events that way. But then one of the major fields that you'll see there is going to be the event overview field, which pulls from the event overview, obviously the event overview field that's in the event info tab. So one thing that's good to note there is that your best practice for that particular field is going to be to paste plain text into that field and then modify it from there. Use the different options that you have for adjusting the font size and color and things like that once you've pasted it in as plain text from something like Notepad. If you paste it over from a Word document or an email or something like that, then it can carry over HTML source code, and that can kind of impact the way that it looks in a way that's not necessarily very easy to fix. So again, your best bet's going to be to paste it as plain text and then modify it within the actual event field, the event overview field, and then that will carry over correctly to the app. Another thing that to kind of note when you are embedding images within that event overview field is that you want to make sure that any images that you're using there are visible kind of to the general public. You want to make sure that you're not pulling an image from a password protected area on your website or something like that. You want to just, again, make sure that it's something that's going to be visible to somebody without any additional login required. We've seen a couple of examples where there was an image that was used that apparently was kind of behind some sort of a password protected area. So it just appeared as kind of a blank section there, didn't actually display the image. So just something to kind of keep in mind when you're working on setting up that event overview field. Another thing that is that you'll want to definitely fill in if applicable is the CE credit or SER credit section if your event does qualify. You want to make sure that you actually fill it in on the event itself so that information will be highlighted and kind of pulled out into this kind of tag here. And I'll show you once we're done kind of looking at these examples, I'll show you within the actual environment how you can set these different parameters. Again, these are probably things that you're familiar with, but we'll kind of point them out just to make sure. So this is the one field of the things that we're talking about that's not done within Event Builder because it's something that was customized for us. So it's actually in the regular Salesforce interface. So I'll show you how you can easily get to that interface from the event itself. So when you set that, you're going to want to check the box to indicate that there should be education credits assigned, and then you're going to want to put in the appropriate value for the CE credits as well as any SER credits for the kind of ethics subset of credits there. And you can see once you fill that in, then it does bring it out and sort of highlight it here, and that really does kind of stand out within the app itself. So it's definitely something that kind of would draw the attention of members who are looking at events there. The next field that is sort of highlighted within the app is the featured speaker call out section here, and you can see that it does list them out by name. To have them pulled out within this featured speakers area, you do have to actually set them up as speakers within the speakers tab. So you can see this is an example of how you would set that up, set up the speakers in a situation like this. Obviously, not all of your events are necessarily going to have speakers that you need to feature in this way. If you're having just kind of a social function, you might not need speakers, and in which case you can just leave that section blank. But if you do have speakers that you would like to feature in this way, then you'll definitely want to set them up within that speakers tab so that they'll pull into that section of the app. And same thing with your venue, although I think most people probably would automatically fill in the venue section. But you would fill in the venue fields on the venues tab in the event builder interface. And again, it won't pull out into this location section unless you do set it up within that venues tab. And one thing to note there is that the system is going to automatically pull in the name of the event and the address here. So there's also that separate display or description field within the venues, which we'll look at in a second. So you don't need to repeat either of those fields. You don't need to repeat the name of the venue or the address itself within that description field, since they're already included in those fields that are pulled in separately. So any questions about those pieces so far? All right, sounds good. So let me show you just as an example so that we can kind of see it here in the live environment here. So obviously your event info section is going to be here. This is obviously a test example, so we don't have very detailed information here, but that's where you're going to pull. That's where that's going to pull from, and you're going to want to make sure again to paste it in as plain text, or you can just type it in there directly, and then make any changes to the way that you want it to be formatted using the options here. So there's that section. We've got the venues section here. So you would add your venue here and make sure you include the venue name as well as the address here. And your speakers, you would want to set those up again as an actual speaker object that would pull into the member app there. And also, this then is where you can find the difference between the event name and then the event display name. So again, if this is the name that you want to use to refer to the event for your internal purposes, you can use that, but then you could change the display name so that this represents what you actually want to show up on the public facing version, not only the actual registration page itself, but also in the app. And then as far as the CE credit part goes, again, that is not something that you can edit directly from here. So to make changes to that, what you would do is you would go into Edit in Salesforce. From this event builder view, you would click Edit in Salesforce to go back to that other view. And then if we can find the right section, here we go. So this is where you would check the box to assign your education credits and input the number of credits that event qualified for. And then you would save. All right. Go ahead and go back into edit mode, and we will then move on to talking about what do you want to do if you don't necessarily want your event to show up on the app. Either you never want it to show up on the app because it's a private event or something like that, or you want it to show up on the app eventually, but not right now. In either case, what you can do is you can set up what we're calling the soft launch status, which again is a separate status that you can create, and I'll show you that here in a second. And basically, once you've created that soft launch status, all of the other functionality of the event is going to be exactly the same as if it were active. Individuals can register for events. You can send out a link to the event. You can put a link on your website. Individuals can, again, register. It will keep track of, attendee numbers and all of that sort of stuff. Everything else will be exactly the same. It just won't push out to the app. So in a situation like that, again, depending on the reason for setting up your soft launch status, again, if you're doing it for testing purposes because you want your board members to test it before it actually goes out to the rest of the membership, once they've tested it, you can go ahead and then push it to change the status to active, and it will just continue taking in registrations at that point. Or again, if it's something that you never want to be out on the app, you can just leave it in soft launch status until it's over, and then you can close it. So you have either of those options. So then this is an example of what the soft launch status is going to look like, but let me go ahead and show you in the live environment what that looks like to actually create one of those. So we're back on our training event here. So if you go down to the statuses section, I think I actually have a soft launch status created here, but I'll show you how you go about doing that. So by default, all of your events are going to have a planned, active, and closed status set up here. But then you can go ahead and create your soft launch status. And one thing that's once you've created a soft launch status for one of your events, if you use the cloning functionality and you clone later events from that original event, then it will clone that soft launch status as well. So you don't, if you're using the cloning, you don't have to create that soft launch status every time. It will create it for you. But to create a soft launch status or any status, you would just input the name of the status here. I'm going to, we'll call this soft launch 2 since we've already got one soft launch status here. And then all you have to do is basically click the 2 boxes here so that this will allow registration, people to register for that event in that status. And also publish to portal basically means that it basically has the ability for someone to view that registration page and complete registration processes that way. So once you've done that, you can go ahead and click Save and Close, and it will go ahead and create that soft launch status for you. Then what you'll want to do as well, we'll actually go ahead and we're going to say that we're going to push this back into plan status so I can show you a couple different things. So once you've created your status, you can see that within the Pages option, this is where you go to configure how you want your registration page to look for the different statuses that it's in. So again, and one thing to point out is that you're only able to configure your pages when the status of the event itself is in either planned or active. Once you've actually, if the event were actually in the soft launch status, you would not be able to configure your pages. So you want to make sure that you do your configuring here, your configuration before you change it to that soft launch status. But what you can do then is for, well, and one thing that I'll point out too is that for the active status or for the closed status, there is a default set of pages that are here automatically, with some of them being published and some of them having certain components dragged over onto those pages automatically. For the soft launch status, it's basically just blank. So you kind of have a clean slate to work from, and you can essentially decide at that point, do you just want one single page for the registration, or do you want separate pages for venues and speakers and sponsors and all of those sorts of things? So what you can do is once you've decided how you want it to look in that soft launch status, you can click New Page, and then you can go ahead and mark that page as published, and then here you can give that page a name. And again, if depending on why you're using the soft launch status, if again you're planning to eventually move it from soft launch to active status, you might decide that you want to have your soft launch status mimic the way that your active status looks. So you might set up all of the same pages and configure them exactly the same way. Or, if you're going to keep it in the soft launch status forever, then you don't even necessarily have to configure an active status. You can just kind of leave the default settings there and just set up the soft launch status the way you want that to look the whole time that the event is open for registration. Just input a navigation label and a browser label here, and then again decide what components you want to drag over here. So again, if you're having one single tab with all of your information on it, you might choose to drag all of these details over here. Or if you're planning to have separate pages, you might choose just to have the event overview on this event page and then, or on this overview page, sorry, and then create separate pages for venues and speakers and sponsors and that sort of thing. Once you then have your soft launch status configured the way you'd like, then all you have to do is change the status here from planned to your soft launch status that you've created. And then again, at that point, somebody would be able to register for your event. You could add the event to your calendar on your website. You could send out a link, whatever the case may be. And then again, if you're at some point planning to actually have the app pick up that event, once you're ready, then you can go ahead and change the status from soft launch to active. So, all right. Any questions about that? All right. Then kind of the last thing that we wanted to talk about as far as working with the app and working with your events in the app is some level of quality control. Um, and these are just kind of some best practice thoughts that we have had. One thing is that we can provide you with screenshots now of the way that your events appear currently in the test version of the app. Right now, it's in the Apple Store and it's being kind of reviewed, going through the review process like all apps do. But then it should be launched or should be live. That piece of the app should be live within the next week or so, I would say. And at that point, any events that you have set up and marked as active are going to push out to that app. So again, if you want screenshots of the way your events look currently, we can provide those to you now for you to review. Once the app does go live, again, we would suggest, especially if we haven't sent you any screenshots before then, we would suggest going ahead and downloading the app if you haven't already, and then taking a look at your events in the app to make sure that they all look okay, that nothing looks weird or looks different from the way that you would like. And then going forward, as you publish each of your events, as you move it to active, we would definitely recommend just taking a quick look at that in the app once that's pushed out. Again, just to double check and make sure that everything looks the way you'd like, because because of the way that the two systems integrate. It's possible that some things that look fine on the actual registration page may not bring over to the app in quite the way you'd like. So again, just a good best practice to check each event after you move it to active to make sure that it looks fine in the app as well. And then obviously, if you do find something that looks weird or not quite the way you'd like, then we would recommend going in and making any edits that you need to kind of optimize those events for the way that they'll look in the app. And then again, some of the things to watch for that we've already sort of talked about, making sure that your event name looks the way you'd like in the app, that it's not repeating the date or other details that are already there on the page. Also, any formatting issues for that event overview field in particular, making sure that that the text looks fine, that there aren't any sort of white space gaps, and also just making sure that your images are displaying appropriately also. All right, so any questions on anything as far as the app goes? Okay. So, and then I would think, but let me know your thoughts. I think probably you're all pretty familiar already with the Lightning style event setup, but would any of you like more of a refresher, a bit more of an overview of setting up events in Lightning style? Let me know your thoughts. Okay, we've got a yes, please. So I'll go ahead and talk about that a bit more. If anybody does not want to stay for this part, you're welcome to drop off if you'd like. But we can certainly walk through this a bit more for anybody who would like to stay on the line. So let me go here. So As far as the lightning style events go, one thing that we have found is that because the event categories work slightly differently with lightning style, or really with some of the more recent changes within the within Member Nation, it's best to kind of work from a brand new event category in a lot of cases. So what we're trying to do actually for new societies that are coming on board is create a brand new event category to use as kind of a default for them. Um, that's something that we can certainly do for you now if you'd like, or if you have one that was created fairly recently, then I would say probably in June or more recently than that, then those are usually safe and should definitely have all of the functionality behind them that are needed. But basically any event that you create, you're going to need to assign to an event category. So when you're ready to start setting up your events, then you're going to obviously click New here on the Events tab. And your first option is going to be to choose whether you want to clone an existing event or create an event from scratch. Obviously, if you've never created a Lightning event before, you would need to create your first one from scratch, because to clone an event, you're going to have to clone it basically it's going to clone in the style that the original event was created in. So your first Lightning event you would have to create from scratch, and then you could clone from that going forward if you wanted to. So we'll go ahead and say that we're going to create one from scratch. Let's see. So this is an example of what you probably would not want to use as your your display name, because obviously the date is going to be repeated on the page and things like that. But if this is a name that is helpful for your society, for again keeping track of that event, for organizing your content, then you can certainly use that as your event name. And then when we go to the event builder, again, you can change that display name to something that looks better, both on the registration page and on the app. So again, here you're going to pick your registration style of Lightning for the Lightning event. And then this is where you're going to choose your event category. Obviously, you're not going to have this many categories to choose from. You'll probably have just a handful at the most. We've got a question about, will simple and conference style be removed here? And I don't know the answer to that yet at this point, just because this interface is something that's used by all of Fontiva's clients, basically. So it would kind of be a decision that Fontiva would probably need to make themselves to remove that entirely. So, but it's something that we can check with them on to see if that's something that they're planning to do in the future. I don't know if it might be something where they would essentially have to have all of their clients having phased out all of their conference and simple events first. So, but I'll make a note to check with Fontiva to see if that's something that they are planning to remove there, because we've definitely heard from them that they're not really supporting those other styles going forward. So we can kind of see what their plan is for the future there for those. And we'll click Save and Continue. And then if you've worked with the conference style events, this is going to look somewhat similar, just because it does have the ability to have the different tabs across the top. But it kind of incorporates those features as well as some of the additional features and functionality that are available into this one style. So we'll just kind of take a look at all of these tabs going down. We won't necessarily fill in everything here. And I'll point out to you too, in case you're wondering what's going on here, because this is our training environment, it already has the Walk Me functionality. Let's see. So we've got another question. Where are the society logos? And so the society logos are not incorporated as part of the sort of style here for the Lightning event. That is something that we have Susan Field kind of looking at, our user experience colleague. she's taken some things like that, and we've definitely taken that as feedback that it would be helpful to have that added. Some societies, what they will choose to do, since the logo is not incorporated automatically, is they'll choose to add basically a banner as part of their as part of the event overview field. They'll put kind of a banner that has the society logo in it right there. But again, that's some feedback that we've definitely taken in as far as kind of the look and feel type features go. And the events link that goes to the upcoming society events. Oh, that one, I'll check on that one because I don't know for sure. I hadn't really thought about that one, that used to be there, and you're right, I have not seen that lately, so I will ask about that as well.
And Megan, can we just see examples of finished events again?
Yeah, we can take a look at some at the end. I'll see if I can find some live ones out there, and we'll take a look at those. Oh, so I was pointing out too that we have what's going to be on our call at the end of this month, which is going to be the Walk Me feature, which is essentially kind of an overlay, a training overlay that will be embedded within Member Nation to make it easier for setting up events. So if you see some of these things that you haven't seen before with these different pop-up boxes and this Walk Me link down here, that's kind of what that's all about. So that will be available again probably in early October. Let's see. So again, here you would fill in all of the details here. Your the number of tickets you want to sell is what you're going to input here. You will probably always want to go ahead and check the auto sellout box here, just because that will ensure that you never go over the total number of tickets that you've indicated you want to sell. Once you reach that number of tickets, that total number of tickets, then it will automatically mark the event as sold out. This can be, if you don't have this box checked and you have multiple tickets, for example, and so for example, if you have a total capacity of 200, for example, but you've indicated that you're willing to sell up to 75 of each of 4 different ticket types, you could run into a problem if you haven't gone over the 75 of any one particular ticket, but you've reached the capacity of 200. If you don't have the auto sellout box checked, then it's not going to necessarily mark as sold out. So again, another good reason to check that box there. Obviously, you would fill in things like your time zone, your start and end date and time, the registration timer. When someone goes to register for your event, they will choose their tickets that they want to purchase, and once they move on to the next screen, it basically gives them this window of time in which to complete their transaction. It defaults to 15 minutes, but you can adjust that if you want to give them more or less time to complete the transaction. But essentially, it's a way to sort of reserve those tickets for that person while they're completing the registration process. Down here, this is where you would embed your banner image to use across the top of the page. One thing that, again, kind of a best practice suggestion there is to use a banner image that either has just kind of a more kind of scenery, or it could be a skyline or something like that, or something that's more just kind of a graphic. If you use something that actually has text within it, it can cause problems just because that banner image itself is not necessarily responsive design. The rest of the event page is. But so basically the rest of the page would go ahead and render appropriately on any sort of a mobile device, but that banner image itself might not. So if you have, again, some text within that banner image, when you look at it on a mobile phone, it could display just part of that text. So just something to keep in mind when you're choosing your banner image there. Again, this is the event overview field where you'll want to paste in your details, again, preferably from something like Notepad, and then use your formatting options to modify that text. Calendar reminder text on an actual live event, and again, we'll try to take a look at some here in a second so we can kind of see exactly what we're talking about there. There's going to be an add to calendar button in the upper right-hand corner so that someone can add this event to their Google Calendar or iCalendar or Outlook or something like that. It has some standard fields that are carried over as part of that calendar reminder. So the event name, location, date, things like that. But if you want to actually have some customized text around that calendar reminder, you can input that here. And the email notification text, this section can be left blank because we have the automated notifications that go out for your events. So you don't need to fill in anything there. For your ticket types, again, this is kind of the most complex part of setting up any event, I think, really, is thinking about how you want to structure your ticket types and pricing. And the two kind of go hand in hand, the ticket types and then the price rules, to kind of configure the way that you want your pricing to work. So again, you can set things up with multiple ticket types so that someone can see the different pricing all listed out as separate ticket items, and they can choose the different tickets that they want to purchase. Or you can set everything up all as one single ticket and then just have the price rules associated with that ticket adjust the price based on the characteristics of the person who's making the purchase. So if they have a member badge on their record, it'll automatically adjust and give them the member price. If they're using a coupon code, it will automatically give them the price that's associated with that code, things like that. And when you go in to actually create your ticket types, it's pretty straightforward as far as actually setting them up to begin with. Again, this is going to be your default price that you'll input here. You have the ability to enable ticket waitlisting. You can set things up as group ticket types if you want. The one thing, and you can do sort of group tickets in a couple of different ways. Obviously, someone could go in and purchase 5 individual tickets if you'd like. You can also do things, so if you want someone to be able to get a particular price, if they purchase a bulk number of tickets, you can set that up as well. So, if they purchase 5 tickets, it'll give them a reduced rate. But if what you're wanting to do is essentially sell almost like a table, kind of like a table ticket, so that someone has to purchase 4 tickets in kind of one group, then you can set this up as a group ticket type. The one drawback to doing things this way is that that's still going to look at that group ticket as one single ticket. So it's your attendee numbers will adjust, but the actual it won't necessarily count toward your overall capacity, your overall quantity in the same way that you might like it to. It's still going to just count as one ticket. So when you go to set up your or to do your manage inventory, which we'll talk about next, then you'll just want to kind of keep that in mind, because you can determine how many of each type of ticket you want to make available to make up that total of 200 in this example. You can also attach forms. So if you have a questionnaire that you want to ask someone when they're registering for your event, if you want to ask them about dietary restrictions or something like that, you can create these forms and then attach the forms to your ticket. And again, you can reuse those forms going forward on multiple events and things like that. You can also do alternate pricing, so early bird pricing or on-site pricing. And you can fill in all of your accounting fields here. If your events are taxable, we will have helped you set up a tax class, and you can just attach that tax class to your ticket type there. Once you've set up your different tickets, actually, let me go ahead and quickly create a second ticket so I can show you. You can work with managing your inventory. So here we have our 2 different ticket types here, and we'll check that box just to say that we did. Oh, and we actually need a capacity in here. So here we set our capacity at 200, and so then at this point, this is where you're going to need to go in and say how many of that 200, how many do you want to be of each ticket type. And different societies are probably going to do this in a variety of different ways. It may be that that if you have, for example, a member ticket and a non-member ticket, you might say, well, I want 150 of the tickets to go to members, and then we'll have 50 for other guests. So you could do things like that. Or you might decide that it doesn't matter to you, of that 200, how many of them are the second ticket and how many are the single ticket. What you could do in that case is you can group them together. So if we click both of these and then we say we want to group the two that we've selected together, here you're going to essentially put some text that's going to display on the registration page. So you might put something like, select your tickets, and then you could say, I'm going to have the total quantity here of 200. So again, you can decide whether to group tickets together as far as your quantity goes, or set specific numbers of tickets for each ticket type. So you have some different options there. And then you can also work with price rules on your ticket types. So for example, if you drill back in and take a look at your price rules, this is where you can set different pricing parameters on your different ticket types. We can see again, this is our default price for the ticket, for the single ticket. You can set things like a total limit for all orders. So if you basically want this price rule to only be available a certain number of times across your entire event, you can do that. You can set start and end dates for particular criteria for the particular price rule, so that this price is only in effect for this 1 week or whatever the case may be. Then this is where, if you have a source code or a kind of discount or coupon code that you've created, you can start typing in that source code and link that to that price rule. So basically, someone would have to input this source code in order to receive this particular price rule. And then you can also, this is how you would also set your badge type. So if you have a price rule that's only available for certain individuals with certain badge types, you can start typing in those badge types to find them here, to attach them to that particular price rule. And one thing that's important to note, and it mentions it right here, is that when you're working with your price rules, anything that's kind of in this blue shaded section below here, for this price rule to be in effect, any criteria that you've set down here, all of those criteria have to be in place. So you don't necessarily want to have a badge and a source code and date ranges all on the same price rule, unless you really want someone to have to meet all of those criteria, in which case it's fine to do that, but it is going to look for the person to meet all of those criteria in order to get that particular price rule. If you don't want them to have to meet all of them, but you want to make those 3 separate options, then you can just basically do save and new to keep adding new price rules to that ticket type. So you could have one price rule that had a badge associated with it. You could have a second price rule that had your discount coupon or coupon code associated with it, etc. So that's how you can kind of set that up. Again, venues, it's pretty self-explanatory. You would just click add venue, fill in the details. Again, this is that description field where you are going to input information that's not the venue name or the address, but might be something like, this session will be held in the grand ballroom, or, park in the lot on the west side of the building, or whatever the case may be. Just other details about the venue that you might want to incorporate there. This permissions, this is kind of takes the price rule criteria one step further, and you can restrict either an entire event or specific ticket types, so that only people with those particular badges can even see those things. So if you have, for example, a members only event, then you could go ahead and restrict access to the entire event, just to those individuals who have your member badges on their record, for example. But again, probably wouldn't want to use that unless you really want to limit who can actually see that particular event. Speakers, again, this part's pretty straightforward. You would click add new speaker, fill in the speaker name, If they have a contact record and member nation, you can look them up here, and that will link their, basically add that speaker history to their contact record in the system. You can fill in their title, company name, browse to find their image, add their bio details here, add links to their Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter profiles. Agenda. This is going to be if you have something like a conference where you want someone to be able to register not only for the conference as a whole, but also to register for specific workshops or specific sessions within that overall conference. So you can set up these schedule items as part of this agenda. So when you add a new schedule item, basically you can give the schedule item a name. So, you know, soft dollars workshop or whatever the case may be. Put in your capacity for that particular session. So you can have your overall capacity that we set on the event info tab, but also a capacity for each specific session. You can enable waitlisting on these sessions. You can add the start date and time for that specific session and how long that particular session is going to last. You can add the room or location where that's going to be held, and you can actually have separate pricing for those sessions. So another example might be if you are going to have an annual meeting that also has some sort of sporting event associated with it, you could price those as separate items so that someone is charged differently based on which parts of that event they're going to attend. You can attach forms then as well. So if you want to ask questions of the person who's registering for that specific session, or the golf tournament that's part of the overall conference, or whatever the case may be, and fill in your accounting fields there as well. Sponsor packages, the way that these work in Member Nation is once you've kind of enabled your sponsor sales, what you create in here is the actual sponsor package. So something like Platinum package and whatever the price is, and the number of those that you have available. And again, you can attach forms and you can put in your accounting information here. Once you've created that actual package, the way that you will kind of administer that is you would line up your sponsor, and then you would actually process a sales order for that person when you kind of take in their funds. So you would basically create a sales order for them on the back end. You would process their payment. Once you have done that, once you've essentially processed a payment showing that they've purchased the sponsor package, that's what's going to add them to the sponsors tab here. You can't manually add a sponsor here. But once they do show up here by virtue of having purchased that sponsor package through the sales order, then you can edit the details here once they do show up there. And then statuses we've talked about. Again, these are the default ones. You can add the soft launch status if you want to. And then for your pages, again, we've talked about this as well. But you can see you can set up you can configure your event for the way you'd like it to appear when the event is active versus the way you'd like it to appear when the event is closed. And then obviously you could do the same thing for a soft launch status. And you can see that by default, the overview tab is the one that is published in both active and closed status. If you want to publish one of the other ones, you would just click the pencil icon here. Could mark is published here, and then again you can see the default components that appear as part of that page, and then you can drag and drop over any other components that you want to incorporate as well. And then the last tab here, we're talking about so the question is the functionality of this tab improving? Is this the pages tab that you're talking about? So what I guess what functionality were you wanting to know? I don't know of any changes that have taken place. Basically, you still would go in and you would drag and drop the components that you want. Let's things like that. And if you want, we can always take that offline too. I can make a note to circle back with you, and we can talk about issues with saving as well as not seeing the same thing Carlene can see. That is something that is being investigated. I know, so I'll make a note that can't apparently talk and write at the same time. Yes, as far as that goes, the actual kind of visibility issue that we're having, that is something that is being investigated. I just need to check and see what the time frame is for getting that fixed, so I can circle back with you and let you know what I find out about that. And then the very last tab here is the theme tab. So this is what defines the color of your headings and your text and your buttons and things like that. This is kind of the default setting here. You can then go in and change these if you'd like. So, and obviously you probably want to choose one of the branded colors, and we do have the color palettes on the Society Center showing you what those branded colors are. You would just put in the hex number here. And again, if you have any questions about finding those colors, we can help you with that. The thing that we're kind of working on, that Susan Field here is working on, is getting some custom CSS, some coding that can be embedded in here to do some things to change kind of the way that some of the banner kind of operates. It kind of provides almost like an overlay that makes it easier to see the title there, especially if you have an image in the background that has a lot of contrast in, darks to lights, colors and things like that. It provides this kind of overlay that makes it easier to see some of the text there. So again, hopefully we'll have some more information for you on that. So I know we are at our hour, but I'll go ahead and see if I can find some examples of some events to take a look at, unless, although if anybody needs to jump off, then I'll certainly understand that as well. So let me see. I know we've got some, we'll see what I can find as far as our live events here. Let me see. So this is a Toronto event. This is that add to calendar button that I was talking about, where you can add this event to a variety of different personal calendars. You can see Toronto's added all of the overview information here. For this particular one, registration isn't open yet. It's more like a save the date. The event looks like it's going to be in June of next year. They also have their venue details, so you can see where the location of that venue is, and again, the written out address for that as well. And they've actually created kind of a customized prices tab, and that's not one of the default tab names. So that's one that they've kind of input themselves there, with kind of details about how to go about actually registering for the event. So that's kind of an example there. I'm going to think what else we've got set up. Now I have I think that's the one we just looked at. Here's the annual conference. We'll see what they've got there. Since CFA Institute is using this now as well. So this is, again, this is not, I think this is probably one that they're may still be working on. But again, you can see kind of the banner imagery. This is one where they've changed the color of the font. And for this particular one, they have just the event overview there. And actually it is active. So what else? I'll see if I can find maybe another one or so, and then we'll kind of go from there. Let me see if I can find one that's definitely open. There's another Toronto one, it looks like. So this is another one. And you can see what as far as the imagery for the banner, again, not using text there, just so that there's not any issues with the way that renders on a mobile phone, for example. And again, it looks like they have a similar configuration for this one, where they've got their overview tab and their venues tab and the prices tab for that particular one. But this one actually is open now for registration, so the register now button does pop up there. So, all right. So any other and yes, the color of the text can be changed. You would change that through, let's see, if we launch back into, this is on that the theme tab down at the bottom right here. So this is where you could change those. And the one that you want to use, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the hero text color. The name sounds kind of weird, but but hero basically is that banner area at the top. So you can see it. This color is that white color, but if you wanted to change it to be black or some shade of gray in between there, then you could change that, and it would change the color of that text there. So any other questions for me about this or anything else at this point? So we have a question about updates to email marketing. We're actually trying to track down. We saw something that seemed to indicate that there might be the possibility that the content builder option would be available through the way that we set up our events, or set up our email messaging. So we're trying to track down that information to see if that actually is the case and if it's actually active, because that content builder is a much more, I would say, user-friendly way of setting up events. I keep saying events, setting up emails. So that's kind of one thing that we've really been waiting for and kind of hoping for an announcement on. It's something that's driven by Salesforce. So again, it's kind of something where we're kind of in a waiting game for them to kind of activate that functionality within the way that we use the tool. So again, we're trying to track down whether this sort of online rumor that we saw is true or not. So hopefully that will be something that will be coming soon. Would be the main thing that I'm aware of on that front. So. All right. Well, I think that is it for me as far as working with your events and working with the member app. Again, kind of be on the lookout for that to go live. Again, it should be kind of a live soft launch within the next week or so, but then we'll be pushing out more information as far as marketing materials for how societies can actually market that app to their members and things like that. All of that information will be provided to you going forward as well. So, so kind of stay tuned and keep watch for that. And again, also keep watch for the information about that, the WalkMe system at the end of this month. So other than that, I will talk to all of you later. And thanks again for participating today.